This is our secondary shoe. The way I know this is because the material on the primary shoe is shorter than the material on the secondary shoe. The reason for that is because the secondary shoe does more work than the primary shoe does. So the primary shoe points towards the front of the car. All right? So when you're driving down the road, you got this drum that sits over the top of this, right? And there's axles cruising down the road. And when you hit the brakes, it pushes out these shoes against the drum. Well, as the drum is sitting there rotating, it makes the shoes want to go with the drum, right? Well, they do. They actually start to move with the drum until this one hits this anchor pin and wedges. And when it hits this, it kind of wedges up against the drum and applies even more force. So it kind of gives you that sensation of power brakes. Okay, that's that dual servo energy that's happening there on drum assemblies. So this guy gets used a lot more than this guy does. That's why it has more material. The reason why I'm going over this is because when you put this together, it makes a difference which side everything's on. Okay, so on this axle, the front of the car is that way, yes?
Yeah.
Where's the front of the car on that one?
That way.
That way. Does that make sense? This is not a car. Everybody understands that, right? Yeah, you just put it right there. Thanks, man. This is just an axle welded, and it happens to be pointing that way on that one. This one's this way. So if you're looking at your neighbors, which is fine, you can look at your neighbors. In fact, when you're working on your own cars, if you're replacing your brake shoes, let's say, I always recommend you only do one side at a time. Don't get in a hurry and bust both sides down and then go get the parts, because if you ever have to look at it because you can't remember something, you're too late. You just tore both of them apart. Leave one side so you can always go look at it and go off of that one. So I don't have a problem with you looking at your neighbor. Just don't help your neighbor in any way. You have to do all this by yourself. Just remember though that his is ass backwards from yours. Okay? Everything is going to be just the opposite. If you try to do yours exactly like his is, you're going to be totally wrong. All right, here we go. First thing we're going to take off is the return springs. The way we do it, we take this tool. This tool is for return springs and return springs only. Okay, so this part, it takes the return springs off. See how it's got that hole in it? We're going to stick that anchor pin right inside that hole. Okay. And then we just twist this around and it pops them off. Then we put all of our tools on our tray. That way we don't get them mixed up with our neighbors' parts. And then we're going to take these hold down springs off, and we're going to use this tool to do that. So I like to put my hand back here and hold the pin so I don't push the pin out the back when I'm trying to push this spring in. Okay, and then I use my thumb to hold the shoe in place while I do this. So all you do is turn it a quarter turn. So see, it's not threaded. I get people over here and they're twisting and twisting and twisting. I'm like, what are you doing? So all it is you're just going through that slot and then turning it to lock it in place or to unlock it. Yeah? Makes sense? Okay. Okay, same thing on this side. I put my hand back here, hold it with my thumb, and then turn it. Now at this point, there's nothing holding these shoes on. So all this stuff's going to kind of fall apart. So try to take a look at how it's set up at the bottom before you take it apart so that you can try to remember how it goes back together. Okay? And then, if this was a real car, you would first, before you went and put your new shoes on, you pull these boots back, make sure there's no brake fluid inside here or here. If there is, that means that the cup inside here is leaking on, there's cups on both sides. If one of the cups are leaking, this guy's bad and it needs to be replaced. It's like 10, 20 bucks for a new one. Just replace it. Because if you don't, and this starts to leak out onto your new shoes, you just ruin your brand new shoes. You cannot wipe them off. Not those shoes. Those shoes. And it will ruin it, okay? Brake fluid will ruin your brake material if it gets on it. So, make sure that's good. And then before you go and start putting your brake shoes back on, put some white lithium on these spots right here. Because that's where the shoes actually sit and move. And they're constantly moving, right? So they're sitting right here and they're constantly moving in and out. okay? And if you don't put some there, then you end up with metal against metal, and that's never a good thing, right? We end up getting, every time you hit your brakes, you get that squeaky brakes, which drive people crazy. So make sure you lube those points. And like I was saying, that's where your shoes sit, or right here, right? You do not sit down in this crack. Everyone wants to put them in that crack, and they don't sit there. My teacher always told us that we don't like shit in our crack, so keep it out of the crack, okay? It's supposed to go right there. That crack right there is for the drum assembly. All right. And then you would have to take this guy off and put him on your new shoe. Now, obviously, we're not replacing the shoes, so we're not going to do that. But normally, you would pop this clip off, and it would come with a new one. And then this guy would go on your new shoe, and then you put the new clip on and press it together. Call it good. Then you start putting it back together. So, once you get to this point, though, just call me over so I can see that you've actually tore it all the way down. I don't want anyone cheating and taking a spring off and then putting it back on and going, I'm done. Can I get 100% now? No, I want to know that you actually did the whole thing. So call me over, let me know when it's all the way apart, and then when you start to put it back together. I like to, and this is not, should probably say this before we get started. This is not the only way to do this, but this is the way I was taught when I was in high school. This is how I've always done it. So this is how I'm going to teach it. Okay. What I do is I grab my secondary shoe and I put it on first because I don't want to forget about this cable. People will get over enthused and start putting the shoe on, and then when I go to check it, I'm like, dude, your cable's not hooked up, and you have to tear everything back apart to get to the cable, okay? Because you cannot hook it on once the shoe's on. You have to hook it on first. So it goes on like that. It does not go on like this. And then they're constantly like, what the hell? I don't understand. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it goes like this, okay? And then it sits up here, and then we're going to put our hold down springs on to hold it in place. Take our tool again. You notice how it has that opening in it? Use that opening to try to help you see what you're doing. Okay? And then same thing with this one. Then put this one on next. Put the hold down spring on to hold down the shoe. And then we're going to take our cable, our guide plate, and our primary spring. We're going to put it on next. Guide plate has to go on first. See how it looks like a t-shirt? We do not wear t-shirts upside down. It has to go that way, okay? T-shirt or the guide plate goes on first. That way, the only job that the guide plate's there for is to separate all this other crap from the shoes so that they don't interfere with the shoes moving in and out. Does that make sense? So this guy has to go on first. So my shoes where they need to be. And then I put my spring on. Cable has to go towards the secondary shoe. I like to wrap it around the spring. You don't have to do that. That's how I do it.
Is there a specific reason why it has to go to the secondary?
Yeah, because you'll see it hooks on down here.
Oh, okay.
If it's pointing this way, then you won't be able to, once you get the spring on, you won't be able to move it over to the other side because it interferes with this guy.
All right.
So now we take our primary spring and it goes on next. Okay? And now I'm going to use the same tool that I used to take off the return springs to put them on. But I'm going to use this end. See how it's got that indent in it, that dimple? We're going to put that part against the anchor pin and pry the spring on. Yeah? So it goes like so. And then we're going to take our strut bar with the spring and we're going to put it in next. Spring goes towards the primary shoe. Put that end in first. It makes it easier. If you put your secondary return spring on first before you put this guy in, you can't get this guy in because you cannot. These are strong. You cannot move this. you can't move it, okay? So if you put the other spring on, you can't get this guy in, so he has to go in next. So he goes right there, and you push him over. So now that I don't have the return spring on this side yet, this shoe still moves around, so I can move it to where I can get this guy in. Now, I can take my secondary spring and my cable guide. Cable guide's gonna go on first. See how it's got that lip on it? That lip has to go inside that hole. If it doesn't, then this guy, instead of sitting flat like this, is gonna sit crooked, and then the cable's gonna ride behind it, and you're gonna lose points. And now we'll talk to you about how I'm gonna grade your points on this when we're all done. Okay, and then the secondary spring goes on in that same hole. And I can get to lay down. Take this. Okay, just make sure that that guy stays flat. Now you can take my cable, pull it up through here. And he goes right on that groove, okay? And the cable stays in front of these little tabs. It does not ride behind these tabs like that. That's a no-no, okay? You'll lose points. So, it has to sit just like that. And then this last spring, this goofy looking one, this end goes in this hole, and it lays like that. And then this one, this piece, goes in this hole, and it sits there and moves up and down, and it adjusts the star wheel. So it moves up and down and turns that star wheel. Yeah, makes sense? So it sits like so. And this cable is going to hook into it, and the spring is going to hook into the same hole. And it's going to be like this when we're all done. Okay? So that is what we're going to do next. This is the hard part. This is the part that takes 3 hands, and you only have 2. So you're going to have to learn how to do this with 2 hands. So the trick is you have to keep pressure on this, and it's got to be pushing that way, not this way. I get people holding it this way, and then the cable's all loose and keeps falling off, and I'm like, no, you've got to keep pressure that way to keep it in the right place. And you're going to take this tool and the hook part, you're going to hook it onto the spring. The other part is going to hook right there. See how every shoe has that little end, that dimple part on it? That's there just for this tool. So we can hook it there. And then, see how I'm using my forearm because you need 3 hands, right? And we don't have them. I'm using my forearm to help control this tool. And then I'm going to stretch it over. And I'm going to have to get close so I can see what I'm doing. So you guys aren't going to be able to see, but I'm going to stretch it over and hook them together.